Coggeshall Memories. Judith Crawford, speaking on January the 30th, 2008, talking to Polly Clark. Okay, I've already sent. So, Judy, how long have you lived in Coggeshall?
On and off, a very long time. I came here when I was 2. My parents moved from Fearing, where they lived, and my paternal grandmother lived in Fearing. She was a nurse, and I'm the product of my mother's second marriage, because her first husband died in the war, and she and my father had known each other a long time in Hornchurch, and then when they married in 1947, they came down to live in Fearing, firstly with my grandmother in her cottage, Walnut Tree Cottage on the green, and then they bought a house called Old Wills in Fearing. And then they moved to Coggeshall, I think, when I'm not totally sure, I think I was about 2. So that's...
so you wouldn't remember Fearing, really?
No, not at all, no. So I came to Coggeshall about 1950, 1951, I'm not quite sure when. And they bought Cromwell Lodge in East Street then. And I lived there all through my childhood.
Where did you go to school?
I went to the primary school to start with.
Yes.
As did all the other local
Which was
St Peter's in Stoneham Street.
Yes, so slightly school, different place.
Which is now has been more recently developed into housing. And there was a lovely headmaster there called Mr. Curtis, and he and his wife ran the school, and they lived in that lovely little gingerbread house in the middle of those buildings.
Oh, I know.
With the it's a really pretty little cottage.
Yes.
And it was a really happy school, and as I say, all the local children went there to start with, I think. And I can't remember many of the teachers' names, but I remember one lovely lady who ran the infant class called Mrs. Backhouse, who was a large, cuddly lady, and I liked her. And I also remember the outside loos, which were horrible. We all hated them. And they were still there when my own children went to primary school. Seriously.
What, they were literally out of doors, were they?
They were still using the outside loos. Well, they were in a building, but you had to cross the playground to lose.
Right,
and
yes.
Generations of children hated those outside loos.
At least they didn't loiter there.
No, but they were cold and miserable. And then from there I went on to a school in Colchester called Ainsley. And then I had to go on the bus.
So did you go on the public bus to school?
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Did you go with other children?
Yes, there were other... Actually, did I go on the public bus? I can't really remember now. But certainly there were other children travelling on the bus. And I went there when I was
And did you have older siblings from your mother's previous marriage?
No, there were no children in that marriage. So it was just myself and my younger brother, Guy.
So you just had the one brother?
Yes. Yeah. And Coggeshall was a really different place then.
I'm sure.
Everybody knew everybody just about.
Yes.
I don't know what... Well, I wouldn't have known as a child, but I don't know what the population was, but it's quite a lot less than it is now.
It was really the old streets, I suppose, the old houses.
So you imagine Coggeshall with... I mean, none of the Honeywood estate existed, of course, then.
I suppose the... some of the council houses would have been
Some of the council houses would have been there. But, I mean, Honeywood was all fields.
Yes.
The estate was all fields there. So Coggeshall didn't extend... I mean, it extended down Tilkey, because there's quite a lot of old cottages down there. But they were scattered, because they've since been in
And they would
filled.
have had big gardens.
Yes. Most people had quite big gardens.
Yes.
Not the cottages in the very middle, because they were tightly packed.
Was there not a secondary school then in Coggeshall?
There was the school where the primary school now is. That was the junior school then, I think. So there wasn't a secondary school until the Honeywood School was built.
There was another school. Wasn't there a school in Stoneham Street?
Stoneham Street
playgroup now, or not? Or Tilkey Road? There wasn't.
No, the Stoneham Street, St Peter's was the infant school, as far as I remember. And then I think the junior school was on the site where the new primary school is.
Right.
I think. This is awful, I ought to remember this. But I didn't go to that school, I just went to Stoneham Street.
Quite. And your brother went to primary school too?
Yeah, we both went, and all our friends went. It was. I remember it being a very happy experience.
Yes, and your father, did he work locally? Or?
He worked in London, and that's actually quite a funny story, because when he went up to London, he was one of 4 commuters from Kelvedon.
No, that's an amazing.
And he was very he was always known. He wasn't permanent army. But he'd been territorial army. And he'd been in the army war.
Yes. And
he had a sort of military bearing, I suppose.
Yes.
He was actually a stockbroker, and so he went up to London to work.
Yeah.
But he was always known as the Major.
Lovely. Was he a major, in fact?
He was in the territorial army.
Yes.
And he was in the war in Italy. And I know what I was going to say. He was very lame. He had arthritis in his hip, and so he used to limp. And he always was late, and he used to drive a jag like a bat out of hell going around the Kelvedon bends. Always late for the train, but because there were only 4 commuters, they knew him, and they'd wait.
Oh, wonderful.
Major's coming, hold the train. And honestly,
wonderful.
It was just, you can't imagine it now. There are thousands of people travelling.
I know.
So
good.
I just remembered that, actually.
That's a wonderful story. So, which road did he take? The Fearing Road then, rather than
No, he took the Kelvedon Road. Going round those bends like a madman, flying round.
And of course, there probably wasn't a very big car park, but they didn't need it then.
I don't think there was. I don't remember now what the car parking arranged. But I mean, as I say, 4 commuters a day to London.
Wonderful. And your mother, so your mother sort of stayed here in the day, and
she didn't work because on the whole, women at her time didn't.
No.
And I was remembering actually her telling me when they first came here, all sorts of visiting cards came through the door.
Yes.
From the local ladies to welcome her.
When she first arrived.
And to invite her to tea. But you didn't just go and knock on the door, you put your card through.
Really? Even then?
Yes,
it's very Victorian.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
I always remember her. Because I think when we were doing some sorting one day, we found some of hers. And I said, when on earth did you use these? And she said, oh, that's what everybody did then.
Fashion.
Yes. Funny. But you didn't just go visiting people unless you were invited to do so.
But did she find it was a friendly village to move into?
Yes, I think it was. I think a lot of people popped cards through. I mean, nowadays someone would notice somebody new and just go bang on the door.
Yes.
Say, hello, I'm so-and-so.
If they would do that.
Yes.
They don't always do it.
No, not always, but I think people still do. But I remember, yes, we were having a sort out one day and I came across these. That's when she told me that story.
And did she have did you grow vegetables? It's a question I've been asking people. Did you?
Yes, we not initially. We were in East Street, and behind us was a walled garden behind the house, and then behind that was another walled garden, and then the houses and gardens of Church Street, and the plot in the middle belonged to Browning the butcher. And at one time he had his slaughter.
Is that like the Buntings?
Where
Buntings
was,
yes.
Not where it is now.
Oh, right.
It was on the corner of Swan Yard and Church Street.
Oh.
On the opposite side from where Buntings is now. And Mr. Browning was the butcher.
And he had a slaughterhouse there.
And he, years ago, had a slaughterhouse at the back. And that plot in the middle belonged to him. And then my parents bought it from him. And
when he stopped slaughtering his own.
He'd long since stopped, actually. I don't know quite what he did with the garden between times. I think maybe he had a veg garden there. And they bought it, and a large part of it was a huge fruit and veg garden. So they added that to the large garden. Yes. And then years later, when my mother...
So, did your mother enjoy growing veggies, or did your parents?
Well, yes, they did, and they had this wonderful gardener for years and years called Joe Garrod, who'd been in the army, and he was a really upright army-trained man. He used to ride the sit-up big bike, huge, great, heavy black bicycle, I'll never forget. And he was a bit gruff, but actually he was a really nice old chap. Yes. And very, very courteous, and used to call my mother Ma'am, and my father was always Sir. And my brother and I in those days were Miss Judy and Master Guy. Yes. Because that's, again, what happened.
Yes, exactly.
And
it's
we were
the age of deference. So.
Absolutely. And I can remember once, I don't know if it was Guy or I, called him, my father used to call him Garrett, and one day Guy or I called him Garrett, and my father was furious.
Yes.
How dare you call him?
You say
him Mr. Garrett.
Yes.
He is your senior, and you give him some respect and courtesy.
Yes, but you couldn't have known that, really.
No, because that's what I'd heard them call him.
Great.
But it was just sort of,
yes.
it was indicative of an age where that's what happened.
Oh, I remember that too. Yes.
And
up in Nottinghamshire.
am I prattling on too much?
No, it's marvellous, Judith. Keep going. Really.
Sort of
great.
Just things
it's
come
really
into your head as you think about it. But I mean, that's
so you remember that Gardner, obviously quite a character. I wonder whether there are any other kind of particular interesting characters that you remember as a child from Coggeshall.
I'm trying to think back. Have people told you about Frank Baines, the Baines family?
No.
Who lived in Lady Baines lived in Church Street, where Prue Turner and now Gail Mooney live.
In Cedar House.
Yes, and I think her husband was an industrialist, and he was knighted for that, I believe. And Francis Baines was their son, and he was quite a good writer of novels. And he wrote. Have you ever seen his books?
No.
He wrote one called In Deep, and because he went to sea as a young man on a big
submarine, was it?
No, sailing ship.
Oh, right.
I think. And he wrote about his experiences in Deep, and then he wrote about his childhood in Cornwall. And I don't remember what that was called now. I had the book.
Are they still available?
No,
no.
All out of nonsense. That was rather self-indulgent. I didn't enjoy that one very much. Anyway, Frank was a very colourful character.
Yeah.
And he did all sorts of things. He'd been on this ship as a youngish man. And then he started, I don't know when he started writing, I'm not sure what else he did work-wise quite. But he became more and more eccentric as he got older. He was great friends with Dorothy Butterfield, who lived in East Street. And actually she lived in what is now part of the White Hart at one time.
I have heard something
heard
about
that.
I think I've heard about this story vaguely. It's coming back to me from Prue.
Yes, you would have done.
Yes.
She was, wait a minute, she's sister to Prue's mother, I think. I can't remember the relationship.
There was some relationship.
And she was quite a good artist. I've got one of her paintings.
Right,
actually.
yeah.
Anyway, he was very fond of Dorothy Butterfield. But he was a very eccentric person.
Yes.
I loved him, and especially I remember when we were children, he used to walk around in these extraordinary checked trousers, and my brother and I used to call him Fancy Pants.
Yeah.
He was just sort of silly, childish name.
Yes.
We thought he was funny, even as children. And then as I got to know him later, I got to know him quite well as a teenager, at a time when you're fascinated in slightly strange, exotic people, which is what he was. And he and a friend of his, Bertram Bouverie, who used to live near Glasgow, used to go to the Coggeshall Folk Club, which was held above in the room above the chapel at the back.
Oh, yeah.
Where they used to have dance classes as well. And I used to go there, and I mean, they were miles older than me, miles older than me. But I was just fascinated with them, and they were, they thought it was fun to be around with a 16-year-old or whatever.
Yeah.
And we used to tease each other, and I used to think deep teenage thoughts, and they used to tease me. So they were fun.
Sweet.
And then Frank went off to India on a bicycle.
Gosh.
And got dreadfully ill and ran out of money. And Dan Sansom used to look after his affairs, I think, and tried to help him out. And then he came back, and he used to wander around with it. By then he'd got very little money, I think, and he went into the little almshouses on Church Green, one of those there. And he used to wander up and down Church Street, and he'd have this sack over his shoulder and by then a very grey pigtail. And then at one point he had an antique shop underneath the post office for a bit, and he used to sit in a chair in the sun outside and shout at people as they went by. He'd be rude to
Well, he sort of hung on then.
Yes. Yes, he did. And I remember when he first got back, and by then I was married and I had 4 babies, and I had this huge boat pram with my twins in, and
Yes.
a little toddler either side, walking down East Street, because by then we got back to Crawford.
Yes.
And he shouted out at me, he said, "Oh my God, Judith Paul," he went. "Oh, and 4 disgusting brats."
Lovely.
He didn't actually mean that.
No,
It was
of
just the
course
way
not.
he spoke to you. And
Oh, lovely.
he was a huge character, and I thought he was great fun. Some people were slightly offended by him.
So you say you came back from Coggeshall, so you must have spent some time away. Did you go live in
Yes,
London?
I
or-
went. Yeah, I went to live in London for a bit.
Mm.
I worked in London for a while, and then I met Andrew there, and we married and lived in London for 2 years.
And is Andrew an Essex man? Or?
No, not at all.
No.
He's not really from anywhere. His family is sort of Yorkshire and Scotland.
Yes.
But his father was in the Navy, so they were.
Yeah, all over the place.
So he doesn't
he was
really
happy
feel
to-
he comes in from anywhere.
But he was happy to settle where you had your roots, was he?
Well, he was working in London,
Mm.
and we decided to move out once we got a family. And my parents were here, and my father wasn't very well. So
Nice for your mother, but to
yeah,
have you
really.
there. Yes.
And then, in fact, my father died not so long after we moved back here.
But so then your mum was there to be a granny when you had your babies?
Yes, so we had this lovely sort of
Yes.
extended family, which was really nice.
Which is now carried on with you having
Yes.
grandchildren here.
Yes,
which
my
is-
2 of my grandchildren are here, which is great.
It's really lovely, that sense of continuity, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is actually, and I really value that.
Mm.
I mean,
It's worth a lot. That.
oh, huge.
And so rare, actually.
Yes.
Um,
And interestingly, I mean, Sophie and my daughter and Ollie love living here.
Mm.
They love the sense of community.
Yes.
They love, and their friends, the young friends who live here, love this place. They
Yes.
so enjoy living here.
it's just a shame it's so expensive for young people to come in,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it is.
But,
It is.
is your mother still alive?
No, she died in 1999.
Mm.
My father died a long time ago,
Mm.
when Sophie was a tiny baby, which was awful. So my mother was a widow a very, very long time.
Yes.
And she stayed. She then.
So he died really, did he suddenly get ill? Or?
He'd been ill for some time
Oh.
and retired ill,
Yeah.
and died when he was about 63.
That's very young,
Too
isn't it?
soon.
Yes.
So Mummy had a
Awful.
long, long widowhood.
But how nice for her that you had settled in the same time.
Yes, and we got on tremendously well, and eventually we bought the house that I grew up in. And she, by then, she and my father had bought an old a delicensed pub, the Greyhound in Church
Oh
Street.
yeah, the Greyhound. Yes.
And Birkins renovated that for them.
Which then became a dentist. Or
No,
not? No, that's the Yorkshire Grey.
Yes. No, there were so
Oh,
many
no,
pubs in
yes.
this place at one time. It was unbelievable.
Yes.
You could count about 16 pubs in Coggeshall at one
Amazing.
point. So then my mother moved into the Greyhound and thought she had a sale for Cromwell Lodge, but in fact it fell through.
So you bought it.
And we bought it.
Well, you must have been
we'd
rather
come
pleased.
from Fearing. We'd bought a house in Fearing first.
That was a lovely house.
Yeah, very old, 14th century, that one. So that was nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, so then we sort of amalgamated the gardens, so we had this wonderful
Oh, right.
3 walled gardens all connected
Oh, lovely.
between her house and Cromwell
Oh,
Lodge.
wonderful.
And
So the Greyhound is on the right, is it?
As you go up Church Street, it's on the right,
On the right.
next to the bear shop.
Oh, is it? Oh, right. No, I don't. Is that the one that's got a sort of archway in East Street? Or is that another pub? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Sorry, I'm going off. There's a sort of beautiful archway that must have been a coaching in East Street. Doesn't matter.
I'm trying to think what
No.
you mean.
So you had quite a lot of garden by then?
Yeah, so we shared
Yes.
the whole thing with my mother,
Lovely.
including the fruit and vegetable garden.
Yes.
And the children had this wonderful, great, big walled space.
Oh, lovely.
And would go up and see Granny whenever they wanted.
Yes. And what's happened to, have they both been sold now, those properties? Or?
A house was built on the middle garden,
Mm.
and the Greyhound now belongs to, when my mother died, we sold the house.
Yes,
That
yes.
belongs to a young family now, which is
Yeah.
very nice. Nice to know that other people are enjoying it.
Yes, yes. Great.
Other characters, so I'm sure people have talked to you about Brian Saunders, the carver, Janet Saunders' father.
No, tell me about him.
Oh, he was an amazing ecclesiastical carver, wood carver.
Was he involved with Paycocks then? Or?
He did all sorts of work.
Yes.
I can't tell you exactly what.
Mm.
I think actually Beckworth did, who was also a carver, did
Beckworth,
quite a lot
yes.
of work on Paycocks.
We've
Brian
got
Saunders
two
had a...
Beckworth tables actually.
Have you?
Mm.
He had a workshop in, well, they lived in Stone Street,
Mm.
and Janet and Gwen continued to live there until, well, not so long ago, when
So did he do renovation in the church when it was bombed and things like that? Or?
I don't know what
Mm.
exactly. I mean, he did a lot of local church work.
Yes.
And he was very, very
Oh,
skilled.
wonderful.
And Janet, after her parents' death, she and Gwen had all his tools and so on, had a little museum to him in
Oh,
their
lovely.
home. You never saw that?
No.
No, it was very interesting,
Oh.
and used to invite people to come and see.
But that's gone now, is it?
She still, well, I don't know if she still
Mm.
has them. The National Trust were going to take all his tools and
Oh.
exhibit them.
Those are the sort of skills that need to be handed down.
Yes. I don't know if there's anyone carving here now.
No, I was just, Judy Crawford came to lunch, and Julie Sweetman and Wendy, and we were talking about how people working with their hands are so happy.
Mm.
You know, people who actually use their hands.
It's so fulfilling, isn't
It's so fulfilling and so absorbing,
it? Yes.
and so rare now too, actually.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, he was a very, very interesting
Yes, he
man.
sounds very interesting.
I suppose Coggeshall was full of characters, actually.
It must
so
be.
you have to sort of cast your mind back.
Yes.
I was remembering another thing that stands in my memory as a child was, you know, a lot of people in the village then worked on the land.
Yes,
They
of
don't
course.
now, because there aren't many people working on the land
Mm.
around here, and it's all mechanised. But in those days, so much of it was
Well, there must have
by
been more
hand.
livestock, wasn't there? I mean,
that. But
were
also,
there,
I mean, there were a lot of.
was there a dairy farms around?
I don't remember if there was a dairy farm. There
Mm.
probably were, but
Yeah.
I mean, I remember migrant workers coming in to pick peas,
Yes,
for example.
yes.
And I can remember you could
Irish
see
people probably, weren't
streams of caravans.
they? Yes, or
And
gypsies.
Gypsy,
Mm.
I suppose they were gypsies, I don't
Mm.
know. Yeah, probably. And the one local farming family that we were friendly with always used to refer to them as the Diddies, the Didicoys, who come and pick.
Mm.
And you'd see them streaming through the village.
Yes.
And I remember one day as a little girl, there was a knock on our back door at Cromwell Lodge, and I opened it, and then my mother came. And there was this quite frightening looking old man who was
Mm.
really dishevelled and dirty.
Mm.
And he had this tin mug, and he shoved it under my mother's nose and said, "Tea, missus."
Yes. I remember people like that
yeah.
up in Nottinghamshire.
Yes,
It
and
was
they would
quite
ask for
scary.
food as
Yes.
well. But as a child, I was
Mm.
quite frightened.
Mm. Mm. Didicoys, they were.
Didicoys, which is another word for gypsy, I think.
But still, they were
But
cheap
needed,
labour, and they
absolutely.
were needed,
Absolutely.
exactly.
And I was
Gosh.
also remembering we probably went several times, but I remember particularly there was a cinema in East Street, you probably knew that,
I didn't
where
know.
Saunders Garage
Oh, really?
was,
Oh.
and then Fleet Shield.
Yes.
And
Actually,
was-
in that building, or
Saunders Garage was on the left, and where Fleet Shield is was where
Was
the
the
cinema
cinema.
was.
Oh,
And I can
right.
remember going to see the Coronation film, so I
Oh,
must have been about, I
wonderful.
was 53, so I
Yes.
was 5.
Yes,
5.
that was one of the first films I ever saw. That and the Ascent of Everest. They came together. Do you
Yes,
remember?
yes. Yes. I can't remember what else I went. I did probably go and see other things there, but I can't remember what else. And there used to be a cafe next door to that.
Even on in a smaller population, it was able to, you know, make a go of it.
Well, you didn't. Yes. I suppose people didn't travel very much.
They didn't have telly.
No.
No. I mean, did you used to go to Braintree or to go to Colchester
we went
school, of course?
Mainly to Colchester.
Yes.
And another thing stands in my mind about Colchester was there was a wonderful Sainsbury's in the High Street.
Oh, really?
And it was a really old-fashioned sort of place with marble counters and ladies in white with their hair all done up in white muslin.
And that was a Sainsbury's Butchers, was it, or
grocers? It was a grocery store.
Yes.
And my mother, at Christmas time, I don't know why I remember this in particular, but we had a lot of family come to stay, and they always used to have huge breakfast tables full of cold gammon, and you could have cooked breakfast or whatever. And my mother used to buy whole breakfast sausages from Sainsbury's. I can remember these ladies sort of saying, "You sure you want a whole one, madam?"
What really big sausages?
Do you remember there's a sort of a thick, kind of smoky
not really.
pork sausage?
I don't remember those
it was just one thing that was always on the Christmas breakfast table from Sainsbury's. Anyway, that's digressing from Colchester.
Oh, what, like a sort of salami?
That kind of thing. And Colchester was full of shops when I was.
Yes, I mean, I was going to ask you, where did you? I mean, did you do most of your food shopping in Cogs?
I think my mother probably did because
there was bakers and
there were. What did I reckon? There were 3 bakers at one time. Allen's, Furman's, and Cresswell's in Robinsbridge.
I remember Furman's only closed.
Yes, Allen's was on the corner where the travel shop is now.
Oh, really?
And Mrs. Cresswell was in just as you turn into Robinsbridge, where they now have Cottages houses.
Yes.
There were 3 or 4 greengrocers. Janet Saunders had one at one time. The Woods family had one. The Wainriches had one.
Gosh.
Market Hill Stores, which is where Curtain Exchange is.
And I mean, I wonder where they got their produce from.
I don't know.
I mean, would they have gone to Covent
There was
Garden?
probably some. No, I should think there was probably
a wholesaler.
No, there must have been a wholesaler locally.
Yes, quite.
Or they would have bought from. I'm sure they would have bought locally.
And local produce as well. Quite.
Market gardeners and people as well.
Was there actually a market when you were a child?
No, that started much later.
It started again in the 70s, didn't it?
Yes. Tony Bonner, who was Lord of the Manor.
I talked to him.
Did you?
He's one of the people I did a profile for the Link.
That's good because he was
he was
really
a great character.
Fond of him.
Yes.
Really interesting man.
I've got his book actually somewhere too.
Yes.
Yes, it was good that he reinstated the market.
Yes. And it's been really successful.
Yes.
The market. It's been
what
great.
else have you got there, Judy?
I'm trying to think what else was of interest. Oh, there was a wonderful cobbler called Mr. Tilbrook. Have you heard about him?
I have heard the name. Yes.
He was such a nice chap. I used to be very fond of him.
And he mended your shoes.
Mended shoes.
Was he a saddler as well?
No, there was a saddler in Coggeshall once.
Was there?
Just near him. I don't think Tony Saunders was saying the other day, did I remember the saddler? And I don't think I did. It's where Miss Hayward used to live. And there's still a horse above in the glass above the door.
Really? Because every town would have had a saddler, of course, as well as a cobbler.
Yes.
Did Mr. What was his name? Tilbrook. Did he make shoes as well, or did he just?
I'm not sure if he did. I only ever remember him mending
them,
or mending bags, or anything else that needed mending of that nature.
But very skilled they were then.
Oh yes.
And now you go and get your shoes mended, and they just glue them up.
No, it was all properly stitched and all I remember he was a lovely man, but he'd always smelled of sort of polish, and glue, and he always had very polishy hands.
There was something lovely about getting your shoes back with new soles.
Yes.
Yes.
And there was a very strange shop called the Friday Shop. Have you heard of that one?
No.
It's where, I think, it was where there was Wilshire's, which was an outfitter's, and then the Friday Shop, where William Brown is now. I think Wilshire's was on the right, the Friday Shop was on the left. And that was a bit like the cheap shop. It was full of all sorts of bits and pieces. And I have
fascinating.
I can't really remember much about it, except I remember going in there and buying wooden jacks, you know, that you play with.
Oh yes.
Like five.
Yes, like knuckle
5
bones.
stones.
Yes, yes.
I suppose they were 5 stones actually.
Yes.
Jacks, because jacks were metal, weren't they? And that was a great fad at school.
Yes.
Those in the playground.
How lovely! And it was called the Friday shop, but it was it wasn't open just on Friday.
No, I don't know why it was called that.
No.
But it was, yeah, it was a bit like the cheap shop. And then there was Mr. Pamplin. He was a tailor in Church Street.
Gosh, so you could get suits made.
Yeah.
Wow.
And well, there was Alfred Barnes as well. Alfred and Doris Barnes had a shop further up in Church Street. He still is alive and lives in East Street. But he was also a tailor, and she had a sort of wool shop,
yeah,
ladies' shop.
The sort of haberdashers, or
yes, that sort of thing.
All these shops. That
Masses of them, masses and masses.
I mean,
and there was a furniture shop. Jack Smith had a huge furniture shop in Church Street, where Home Comforts, all along there was a huge, great shop. And later on, John, his son, used to in the cocker shop. Much later on, he ran an auction room in there for a bit.
Yeah.
After his father.
Goodness.
So that, you know, you could get all sorts of things done here in those days. And you didn't really need to go after the place, I suppose, for most things.
There used to be a bookshop, didn't there?
Second-hand bookshop.
Second-hand bookshop, and which did binding.
Yes.
Because my mother had several books
rebound
lovely.
there. It was
Lovely
a really
shop.
Beautiful little shop. There was a shoe shop in East Street.
Was there? Gosh.
There were
in
loads
East Street.
Yes. Where, well, there are sort of still big shop windows there now. You used to step down into the shop.
Yes, there are a lot of shop windows along there, which are now private houses.
Yes,
yes.
all private houses there. There was a wonderful sweet shop called Parry's, where the newspaper shop is.
Did you used to run along the street and get your sweeties then after school?
Yes, we weren't allowed to walk along East Street because it was very much the main road through, because there was no bypass.
Oh gosh, that would have been the main road.
Yes.
Must have been terribly
it was
busy.
awful, and it got worse and worse.
It must have been awful.
I remember once, I don't know where we'd been, my brother and I came down, we were allowed to come down Swan Yard, and then we were supposed to wait for my mother to come and take us along East Street, just that little bit.
I'm just going to check I didn't leave my kettle on the ark. Shall we just stop it, actually? There we go.
Oh, I know what I was going to tell you.
Yes.
Yes. Thinking about how things have changed.
Does it need another wipe? It's not a precious table. There
Yes, my brother and I were waiting to be walked back along East Street, because we weren't supposed to walk there on our own because of the traffic. And we got bored because my mother was late. And it was only yards down around the corner, but we were still supposed to wait. So we started chucking stones, as you do, across the road.
The cars?
Well, not particularly at the cars, just skimming them across the road. And suddenly a car came along, and one of our stones hit this car. Yeah. And the man stopped, and he was absolutely livid. He came storming up. He got us by the scruff of the neck. He said, "How dare you do that? Where do you live?" And so we told him. And he marched us back home and rapped on the door and told my mother what we'd been doing. And so we got a real flea in the ear from him, and then we got another flea in the ear and a smack from So, I mean, again, though, that just wouldn't happen now.
Imagine now doing that.
If you did that to somebody's
children. I know.
We were
You'd
terrified.
be arrested for assault.
Yeah. And my mother, she just agreed that we were in the wrong and apologised.
But actually, children were kept in order.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's a very...
Well, I also, much later on,
useful
Lady
story.
Binnie, who lived at Scripps, Bri Binnie, she was chairman of governors at Honeywood, and I was on the governing board at one time as well. And she was up and down to Honeywood School all the time, secondary school.
Yes.
And if there were children, as she was driving down from Scripps, if there were children loitering on their way to school who were late, she would stop the car, tell them off, tell them to get into her car and take them to school, and they did. I mean, this was, we're talking now sort of 60s, I suppose.
Yes.
And they were very respectful towards her.
But the thing is, it was the solidarity among grown-ups. That there was a sort of solidarity.
That was what you did.
That the grown-ups were united to kind of make sure children behaved properly.
Yeah.
And that's been dismantled for good reasons, actually. But it's left a terrible vacuum.
But we were taught a lesson. We didn't forget.
This, did you notice it? What, can't you put it on there, Julie?
I'm just worried about it.
No, don't worry about it. Did you notice a terrific change when the bypass was opened?
Oh, yes, because by then we were back in Coversham, living in Cromwell Lodge, where I'd grown up, and I'd got these 4 babies.
Yes.
Two in a big
must
pram
have been
and
amazing.
toddlers. And the traffic was a nightmare. There was a day, I never forget, where I was walking with all 4 children down towards the post office in the narrow bit, and there was just absolutely solid traffic trying to get through.
And that was going both ways.
Yes,
it wasn't
going both ways. And it was awful by then.
Crazy.
So this, we're talking now about the sort of late 70s.
It must have been one of the narrowest bottlenecks on that road, I should think.
And particularly in the summer when traffic was going to the coast.
Oh.
And this lorry was hooting on and on and on, and it was actually hooting me to get out of the way on the pavement,
so he could get up.
He could get on the pavement and let the rest of the traffic go through. I've never forgotten.
Yes.
And then the day we were still living there when the bypass came, and it was as if somebody had switched a switch.
Was there a sort of grand opening? Did somebody come?
I don't remember who came. Maybe it was the Minister of Transport.
Yes.
I wasn't there.
Yes.
But I do remember being
been
aware
amazing.
that it had been done, because suddenly the village was quiet.
Yes.
And it used to make the houses filthy, and it used to
awful.
vibrate, and it was horrible.
But actually it says something for the resilience of all those old houses that they survived that pounding.
Absolutely.
I mean,
they
were built like ships, really, weren't they?
Yes. But I mean, the ones on the really narrow bit would regularly get knocked by lorries.
Oh.
It must have been terrifying living in
Horrible.
those ones.
Yes.
We were just slightly further back, so we didn't actually have that, but certainly
it must have impinged
vibrated
on the value of the properties as well, and along those
Probably.
roads.
Yes. Yes.
I was wondering whether you remember any particular very interesting or memorable occasions when you were young.
I think I remember going to the rehallowing of the church.
In 53 or whatever it was.
Yes.
Yes.
I must have been very small, and
yes.
I would probably just have been at the primary school.
Yes.
And I sort of think we sang, but I don't know if I'm making that up. The children sang.
That must have been a great occasion.
Yeah.
That's the rehallowing
Yes.
the church. It must have been more than 53 because wasn't it the anniversary last year? It was 57, was it? Didn't we have some sort of a 50th anniversary or something?
Yes. Was that last? Wait a minute.
Was it a couple of years ago?
I'm trying to remember.
No, it doesn't matter.
Well, anyway, I was fairly small.
Yes,
so,
quite. Yes.
And that I think I remember.
Do you remember Fates particularly?
Yes,
Church Fates?
I do. And I remember we were friendly with the Gardner family who lived at Monkwell, just over the bridge. And they had the most lovely garden there, great big garden. And they had one daughter who I was friendly with called Katie. And we were of an age, and I played with her a lot. And I used to love going to that garden because it was huge.
Oh, lovely.
They were on the river, and as we got bigger, we were allowed to row up and down the river.
Oh, lovely.
Down to the Abbey and things.
Yes.
And we spent hours doing that. And And at the back, I liked it because E.W. King used to have their great big Shire horses. They had two horses, Prince and I can't remember what the other one was called. But we absolutely loved those horses, and you could see them from there.
Yes.
They were in the field of.
Were they Suffolks?
Suffolk.
Yes.
Suffolk punches.
Lovely.
And I suppose they worked them in those days. I can't really. They must have done. They wouldn't have just had them for ornamental use. Because there was EW and then JK had their offices in the gravel.
Yes.
And EW's offices at that point were on Grange Hill. And the field behind in the summer was always full of red salvias.
Oh,
that's what they always planted.
Yes. It was very strange, those two companies, because with the rivalry, I think that's what kept them both going so long.
Yes, probably.
Yes,
and of course EW now is out on the road to Kelvin.
Yes.
And still has all the lovely sweet peas and things growing, which is great.
I know, they look beautiful, don't they?
I was trying to think of other things. Oh, other characters. Well, I'm sure lots of people have talked about Pinky Prentice.
Yeah. Oh, the
Stanley
chemist.
Prentice, the chemist.
Yes.
Who's always known as Pinky.
Yes. Well, he's the one who's funding this project.
Yes, of course he is.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, he was a great character, and I can remember again as a child going there and being rather overawed by that shop because it had the huge coloured bottles in the window.
How wonderful!
And he also
was that the same shop that is now the chemist?
No. It was on the corner where the children's clothes shop was just closed.
Oh, there on the corner. Oh, yes.
I mean, he was there for as long as I could remember back. He was there, and his wife Eileen, and Iris, who used to work in the shop, who's still around in Coventry.
And they made up medicine prescriptions.
They did, and he used to make the most fantastic, very bright pink hand cream, which my mother always used.
Lovely.
But he also did glasses, and I wore glasses from a child, a little girl.
Yes.
And at one time I used to go and get my glasses there, and I didn't like that because you had to go into a very dark room with a rather nasty old couch in the back. Have your glasses fitted. And he used to do things like verrucas.
Sometimes really?
He used to give you verruca cream.
Gosh.
And Peter Joyce, who perhaps has been mentioned to you also, he was a chiropodist.
Yes.
And he lived in Bridge Street. And I can remember coming forward again in time when my children were smaller and used to get verrucas, going to Pinky first of all for something for whoever's verruca.
Yes.
And then it didn't work. So then I went to Peter Joyce, and then he said, "Well, what have you been doing?" And I said, "Well, I've been to Pinky," and he gave me this. And he looked at me and shook his head, and he said, I never forget, he said, "That old Pinky," he said, "he's a good old boy, but he don't know nothing about verrucas."
Lovely.
And I was thoroughly told off for not going to him first.
How funny.
But I mean, he was a sort of, that was the chemist was where lots and lots of people went for remedies.
And I think he and his wife particularly wanted this oral history to be produced, and he's paying for for it to be typed up, when the tape's compiled, and then to be, I think, probably typed up and put in a book, and then also put on a CD.
Yeah,
which
fantastic.
is a lovely idea.
Yeah, it's great.
So
he was quite a Coggeshall. Actually, so was Peter Joyce, really.
Yes. Oh gosh, I'll leave that. Let's turn that off.
I suppose the Coggeshall in my childhood was more intimate because it was much smaller, and the pace of life was much slower. And so, I mean, people do still take time for other people in Coggeshall, I think, now. But I think they took even more time then. They weren't rushing around in the same way. Because, I mean, very few people, when I was a little child, had cars here.
No, great.
There were a number of people who'd not ventured very far from Coggeshall.
No.
And that was quite common.
That was the centre of their world.
Yes. So they would work here, and they socialised here, and they shopped here, and so they didn't need to go much further.
Quite.
And I mean, that's a very, very different thing now.
Very different. because I mean, if people aren't going somewhere else, they're thinking about going somewhere
Yes.
else most of the time.
And when we were children, we didn't have television, so
Mm.
I think people were much more reliant on themselves for forms of entertainment.
Great.
So there was a lot of social stuff went on in
Mm.
Coggeshall as well. I mean, there were pantomimes and there were I don't know, lots of clubs. I mean, there still are lots of clubs.
Yes.
I suppose that hasn't changed that
Yes.
much, and we've recently had a pantomime here again, which is
Yes.
great. But I think we made our own entertainment much more, and children were outdoors much more.
Yes,
than
exactly.
now, because that's what children did.
Yes.
I think we were much freer as children. We went off on our bikes, and
Did you used to let your children off on their bikes?
probably when they got bigger,
Mm.
as long as they said where they were going and
Mm.
when they would be back.
Yes.
But
It was already beginning to close in for children even then.
I think so,
Mm.
yes. But I think when we were small, we sort of went off picnicking and biking.
Go
and-
off all day, get back for tea time.
Yes.
That's what we did.
And I don't think there
Mm.
was the same concern about where we were.
No.
As well, it's got more by degrees. I think that was quite different. But also because people knew you and knew where you who you
Exactly.
were and where you lived.
Yes.
And if
And
either
kept an eye.
either if you were being naughty or if you were in trouble, somebody would find you and help you.
Yeah. Yes, I know. It's I mean, we used to go off on our ponies all day with sandwiches, you know, and
Absolutely.
so they would get back by tea time, sort of thing.
And feel quite safe.
Occasionally the ponies would get back first, and then they'd sort of slightly wonder what had happened.
I remember one of my other friends, her father ran the isinglass factory,
Yes.
Mr. Pelly, and she was called Harriet, and I used to go up there and play a lot. And there was a sort of, I don't know what it was for, it was something to do with the isinglass factory, but there was a sort of pool, an outdoor pool, and it was obviously no longer
Not
needed.
for swimming.
Well, not originally. It was it was something to do with the isinglass process.
Not that pond that's there now.
Yes,
Oh, that same pond.
I think so.
Mm.
But then, when it was no longer needed, the Pellies used to use it as an outdoor swimming pool.
Yes.
So we used to go and swim up there.
Lovely.
Which, in those days, very few people had a pool, so that was
Quite.
quite.
Yes.
It was freezing cold, because it wasn't heated, of course.
Yes.
But that was quite
Lovely.
a novelty.
And did you used to play tennis or?
Yes,
any other?
the old vicarage had a tennis court. It's a private house now,
Mm.
and where the tennis court was.
Where was the old vicarage?
In West Street, not quite on the right, going up to Paycock's.
Oh.
It's set back a red brick house.
Oh, which is now built. They've built in the garden.
And they built in the garden,
Yes,
and
yes.
where they built was the tennis court.
Quite a long way from the church, actually, too, wasn't it?
Yes. And Mrs. She was also a Mrs. Baines. She used to do. I don't know if she did B&B as well, but she certainly did teas, and she used to go and pay to play on the tennis court.
Yes.
Which was fun.
Yeah. Great. And do you remember fun fairs coming to town?
Yes, onto the recreation ground.
Mm.
Another thing I remember doing, not quite in Coggeshall, but on the way to Fearing, we had farming friends. And,
Yeah.
In the winter, actually I do in Coggeshall as well. In the winter, it used to freeze much more often.
Yes.
And one of their ponds up on the farm used to freeze, and they used to take the Land Rover down and put the lights on, and we used to skate on the
Skating.
frozen
How
pond.
lovely.
But also we used to skate where the meadow floods by the river. We used to
It's rather
skate.
nice skating on a meadow because
It's
you
very
haven't got
shallow.
that-
You're not going to
Yes.
fall in. But I mean, everybody used to go and skid around or skate
Lovely.
if they'd got skates
Yeah.
down by the river.
Yes, we used
the
to as
winter.
well in Earl's Colne
Yeah.
when the meadows flooded. It
Yes.
was wonderful.
That was good. I was thinking also about the pubs and.
Oh yes.
and
Did
when
your parents used to go up to the pub?
They used to go to the Woolpack, When I was a teenager, it was Jessie Anderson was the landlady there, and it was very much a sort of local social hub where you could go to meet for a drink on Sunday morning.
That's nice.
And especially when I was
sort of after church kind of thing. Or,
yeah. And when I was sort of 16, 17, it was where a lot of families met, and so it was very sociable for young teenagers there.
Lovely.
And,
what fun.
You used to look forward to going to that because you knew that you would meet people there.
Yes, great. And you got married in the church here, did you?
Yes, I did. Yeah, and then my daughter Sophie was also married
Lovely.
in the church later on.
Yeah,
which was nice.
yeah.
So children have been christened. Three generations of
That's
children have been
wonderful.
christened there as well,
Yes.
which is nice. I was trying to sort of think about things to do with the church. I think when we came, the Reverend Brown was the vicar here, who I don't really remember very much about. And then Mr. Davy married me, who was a lovely chap.
Did he have a family?
He was certainly married.
Did he live in the vicarage
He
then?
lived in the vicarage,
Yes.
in the new vicarage.
New vicarage.
I think the Reverend Brown lived further down.
So when was the one that Philip lives in? When was that built?
I don't know. I can't remember.
But that's quite... It's
been a vicarage for
yes,
some time.
Yes. It's a nice house.
Yes. And then... yes, I mean, we've had a long tradition of other things happening there, like concerts.
Yes.
And plays and things. I mean, there've been...
In the church?
Yeah, in my memory there have been several community plays. We did...
Oh, you did an amazing thing for the millennium, didn't you? Didn't you organise that?
Well, with some friends I organised a pageant.
Yes.
Wrote and organised.
I heard all about the pageant. It sounded absolutely wonderful.
It went really well, actually.
Yes.
And we were masses of people involved. I think we had 200 people involved.
It was a really great thing to do.
Yes, it was fun to do.
And did you draw on your expertise from the Flower Festival to do that, really?
No, well, no, not that. I'd been involved in theatre and education, so I was always interested in that sort of thing. And I just thought it would be nice to do something special for the millennium.
Lovely.
And we'd had at least 2 big community plays at church before that. We did Lark Rise to Candlefoot.
Oh, lovely. Gosh, I wonder who it is. Hello? Oh, Martin, hello. I've been wanting to talk to you about your move. Would you mind if I called you back in about half an hour? Are you at home? Yes, I've got your new number. Yep, I've got it written down. All right. I'll ring you soon. All right, bye.
Oh yes, community plays. Yes, we did that as a community play a long time ago. I think that must be 16 years ago, something like that. And then we did Kate Sheffield, who used to live in Coggeshall, did the Lincoln Mystery Plays. I helped her with that, which was great fun.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed doing that.
I must say, Coggeshall it's a wonderful church.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Sort of thing. It's
really
just
lovely.
Good. It's something about having been bombed and kind of cleared out.
Yes.
And it hasn't got all the gloomy old...
Well, it's the biggest, apart from the barn, it's the biggest space we've got here. And,
yes.
And, the church are very generous about it being used.
But then so it should be for
yes.
you. So, it's
I
great.
think so.
Really. Yeah.
And it brings people together, which is wonderful.
It does. I think everybody in the village, even if they're not churchgoers, they feel they must have a sense of sort of ownership of it.
I think so, because they're warmly welcomed
yes,
there for
and
so
with
many
the Flower
different
Festival,
occasions.
and I mean the Flower Festival is an amazing event.
Yes,
It really is.
We had record numbers last year, actually.
Yes. Is it happening this year as well?
Oh yes, it's been happening every year. I think last year was the 20th. David Beaton started that.
Did he?
Yes, he was very, very good at flowers, and
yes.
It was very much his baby.
Yes.
And then Janet Saunders helped him, and then Heather came in. Heather Semkin started helping, and then I started helping. And then Heather it's sort of really quite famous now, isn't it? Well, I suppose
it's sort of up there with Wormingford. And
Yes, I mean, people seem to like to come and come from a long way away.
And it's a rather
great.
good time of year too, because so many of them are in sort of May and June, and very busy time of year really, and it's rather nice to have it in the late summer.
Yes, well, we get quite a lot of visitors, of course, around at that time of year.
Yes.
So they like to come. It's quite an attraction for them. Too,
Yeah.
So, no, it's I love it. I mean, it's a lot of work for everybody concerned, but it's fun to do.
Yes, that's
and
wonderful.
worthwhile, I think,
Yes,
in lots of
yes.
ways. I really value these. We were talking about community earlier on, and I really value anything that brings the community
I
together.
think it's terrific, and
I
it's
think
terribly important. It's actually, Satish Kumar said that more than anything else, if the world's to survive and humanity's to survive, we need to foster community.
Well, I firmly believe
I think it's terribly important. It really is. And this sort of idea that David's rather keen on is transition towns. I think that Coggeshall would be a very good candidate to be a transition town, which is the sort of self-sufficiency idea. Anyway, that's another subject, really. Is there
Well, I
anything
think I
else you
should
want
shut
to
up.
say?
No, I think I've said.
I think that's absolutely wonderful. Judy, let's turn it off. Stop.